We also have a meeting December 6th, those minutes for approval. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second? I will second. Any further discussion?
Yes. So my objections, corrections for the meeting minutes of December the 6th, 2018. First page, 1 minute, 10 second timestamp. I would like the record to reflect the following. This goes back to the Ohio checkbook discussion in regards to a demonstration on how the Ohio checkbook works from our April 2018 meeting and our last meeting of December the 6th. Mr. LaBarbera said what you are arguing about is the data went to Columbus. It didn't. It went from a business office, Debbie Campbell's, to Administrator Greg Bickford's office computer to show the Ohio checkbook works. It was a major point of contention with this group. How controversial? I refer you to the workshop meeting of April 17th, where you can hear our fiscal officer, Bob Porter's behavior. That line is not in the township meeting minutes, but it is in the Ohio Treasurer's notes. My fellow trustees say the minutes were already approved. It only takes 2 to approve the minutes. The ORC says minutes need not be taken verbatim, but should include statements of each trustee, especially if controversial. This indeed was controversial. I'd like the record to show that on page 100 of the updated Ohio Sunshine Laws, under the Ohio Open Meetings Act, contents of meeting minutes states minutes are inadequate when they contain inaccuracies that are not corrected from the meeting. First page, 3 minute 49 second timestamp. In reference to the November 1st, 2018 meeting, where his statements meaning LaBarbera's statements, were not included in the minutes. LaBarbera also noted that details regarding the motion on the cable franchise access fee reduction from 5% to 3% like our neighbor Blue Ash were not included in the minutes. To correct the minutes, all you had to do was add the line like our neighbor Blue Ash. First page, 4 minute 30 second timestamp. LaBarbera continued his statement saying the Parks and Recreation Committee should perhaps have an alternate person to conduct meetings if the park director is unavailable to attend. The next line should be included. The last meeting was held in June. That is half the year. Include the word perhaps. My actual statement was perhaps we need a backup person in case he can't conduct meetings. First page, 5 minute timestamp. We noted that on October the 4th, the meeting minutes should include Law Director Miller's statement about the process for purchasing property. Mr. Miller said, trustees have an executive session, come out and vote in public. In the vote or resolution, it is then public knowledge. I want that line added because that statement is important. This has not always been the case. Mr. Bickford said this process has revolved in the past. Trustees, this is the line, trustees have an executive session, come out and vote in public. In the vote or resolution, it is then public knowledge. It's that line. In the past, this wasn't always the case, and I made reference to it going back to Taco Bell and other property purchases. And I just like to thank you.
Okay. Your objections are so noted. I'd like to address your objections. Mr. LaBarbera, in the spirit of transparency, I'd be willing to vote to enter your Ohio checkbook remarks into the minutes, but before I do, I want to make a comment regarding this subject. For months now, you have voted not to approve minutes because the trustee meeting minutes didn't address the discussion that ensued between Ms. Marcy Longenecker of the Ohio Treasurer's Office and our fiscal officer, Rob Porter, in a workshop on April 17th. I believe that you have totally mixed up the workshop meeting and the April 17th meeting with the trustees on April 5th. In the Thursday trustee meeting, Ms. Bowen came and spoke to us about Ohio Checkbook and wanted our approval to go live on their site. In her presentation, she said that we had already uploaded all of the 2017 data to the Ohio Treasurer's Office, and they had the data and were ready to go live until Debbie Campbell called her and told her not to use it. I then proceeded to ask Ms. Bowen the question, do you mean, and I quote, do you mean to tell me that you already have all of our 2017 data in Columbus? End quote. She replied, yes. I asked that question because I did not understand that we had released any information and were still in the process of redacting certain information as required by law. A subsequent follow-up with Debbie in the morning proved that what Ms. Bowen told us the night before the meeting was completely false. In fact, Ms. Campbell never talked to or even knew who Ms. Bowen was. Ms. Longenecker was not even at the trustee meeting that night. She came 2 weeks later to our subsequent workshop meeting. At that meeting, Ms. Longenecker stated that Ms. Bowen misspoke about the 2017 data, which engaged Mr. Porter in a disagreement with her about Ms. Bowen's lack of transparency. Ms. Longenecker was defending her employee just like Mr. Porter was defending his employee. After researching the situation in subsequent days, it became clear that what Ms. Bowen told us at the trustee meeting was completely false and lacked all transparency, which is ironic because the Ohio Checkbook Program is all about transparency. Your argument has been that we did not include Ms. Longenecker's comments in our trustee meeting minutes when she never attended the trustee meeting to begin with. You have mixed up the two meetings completely. So, Mr. LaBarbera, I would like to ask all of those that were in attendance at those two meetings if they remember what happened the way you describe it, or if my version of what happened is accurate. Then, I'm happy to approve the minutes next month and that reflect the record of the entire body of this discussion on the topic. That would allow us to truly be transparent on this subject. So I would ask Mr. Connor, you were at both meetings, so can you tell us what version you understood?
I understood the description that you just gave as the events as they happened.
Okay. Mr. Miller?
I do not remember the women's names, but the woman from the treasurer's office that was there at the Thursday night meeting definitely said that they had the information in Columbus, and Debbie Campbell had called and told her not to put it on. Then Ms. Longenecker, I think, at the next workshop meeting came in and said she had misspoken. That's when the words between Mr. Porter and Ms. Longenecker took place. So, I mean, that's what happened.
Okay. Mr. Porter?
I concur. For some reason, Mr. LaBarbera wants to continue to harp that I lost my temper or ranted or however he wants to describe it. The situation was I was trying to defend an employee of mine that somebody came in here and said willfully violated the will of this board by sending material to the treasurer's office, an open checkbook, which I knew did not occur, and I confirmed the next morning did not occur. And I just, I was defending my employee, and I will not apologize for that. And when somebody accuses one of my employees of doing something they did not do, and then tries to backtrack on it in a workshop meeting 2 weeks later, where she wasn't even at the meeting where we all heard that, that's when I become upset. I will not apologize for defending my employees, and that's what happened.
So, Mr. Porter, your answer is which version did you understand?
I agree with your version.
Thank you.
Presented.
Mr. Bickford, you were at both meetings?
Yeah, that's the way I recall. I even recall sitting right here saying that it was news to me that it was submitted to Columbus. And I asked Debbie, I said, did you submit this to Columbus the next day? And she said, we did not submit it to Columbus. And she didn't even know, I forget the first woman's name, didn't know who she was. So I had Debbie verify that, so the data was not sent to Columbus.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Collins, I think you were at both of those meetings as well.
I remember it the way that you described it, and I asked Debbie Campbell in the morning, first thing in the morning, if that's what was happening, and she told me that she did not know or had ever talked to him.
Okay. Mr. Holbert, I don't know, were you at both meetings?
I was.
Yes. And what is your recollection?
I agree with Mr. Miller in the way he broke it down. I think that's a complete outline of the events. I don't recall the names either. I remember Marcy. I couldn't tell you her last name, but that's the way I recall it.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect that all of the people present at both meetings, Mr. LaBarbera is alone in his version of the events that occurred, and all the other members of the staff heard something totally different. If we're going to report this in the minutes, it is important to be accurate to facilitate maximum transparency. We've been lectured by Mr. LaBarbera over the past 12 months about how we are doing everything wrong when it comes to minutes, and frankly, everything else as well. He continues to say that the ORC dictates what should and should not be in the minutes, and usually does this with special emphasis on, and I quote, especially if the subject is controversial. I want to address Mr. LaBarbera's continual comments that the ORC specifically states what should be included in the minutes. In Mr. LaBarbera's objections to the August 2nd meeting dated September 6th, his third paragraph reads, and I quote, ORC 507.04, minutes need not be taken verbatim, but items should include statements of each trustee, especially if controversial. So I went to section 507.04, and it's important I read this. The heading is personal attendance at board meetings, request for copies of township records. A, the township fiscal officer shall keep an accurate record of the proceedings of the Board of Township Trustees at all of its meetings and all of its accounts and transactions, including acceptance of the bonds of township officers. The township fiscal officer shall personally attend at least one meeting of the board during each quarter of every year, unless prevented by the occurrence of an emergency from attending. Item B, in any township where the township fiscal officer does not keep the township records in a public facility, the Board of Township Trustees, once each quarter of each year, may request the fiscal officer to provide the board with copies of township records for its review. If the board makes such a request, it shall tell the township fiscal officer, which records it, wants copies by indicating the dates or types of the records it is requesting. A request made under this section does not diminish any trustee's right to inspect township records under Division B of Section 149.43 of the revised code. That is the complete, I read the complete Section 507.04. And I'd just like to get a show of hands. How many people heard in there what's supposed to be in the minutes? Anybody? I'm just curious. The reason you didn't is because it isn't in there. Contrary to what Mr. LaBarbera told us, it is not in there. Mr. Miller, I asked you to do the research, to research the statements that Mr. LaBarbera has continued to make regarding the ORC and what it says should be included in the minutes. Could you please educate all of us on what the ORC actually says on this subject?
Well, the Ohio Revised Code does not say what the minutes are supposed to consist of, merely that you are supposed to have minutes. There is nothing in the code, so I did do some research. I think probably the leading case on this is a Supreme Court case, White versus the Clinton County Board of Commissioners. It's a little off from our situation because this was a case that was dealing with the county and they have a different statute that says some other things. But the gist of the court's decision, in a footnote, the Supreme Court says the word minutes is not defined in the revised code. Further, the court did go on to say, we recognize that it's not the business of this court to micromanage the public record-keeping procedures. Accordingly, we refrain from laying down specific guidelines other than to dictate that for public records maintained under 121.22 and 305.10, 305.10 is the county statute that they were discussing in the case. Full and accurate minutes must contain sufficient facts and information to permit the public to understand and appreciate the rationale behind the relevant public body's decision. So there is supposed to be enough information in the minutes as far as the discussion so that you can tell how or why somebody voted the way they did, which I think I rendered this opinion probably about 9 months ago. Also, there's nothing in the code that talks about the minutes. In an effort to put this to bed, I would hope Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I don't recall if there was a statement made that the information went from Debbie's office to Greg's office, which seems to be what Mr. LaBarbera is asking for.
It's on the video and the audio.
But, and if it is, it
It
is,
is.
let's put it in, but let's put in everything.
Yes.
So that it's all clear as to what happened either that evening of April 4th, was it?
We're not talking about, my reference hasn't been to the night, my reference has been to the meeting where Mr. Porter went ape crazy. And in that meeting, what was said was that what they were arguing about, and I brought it up, she brought it up, that the data went to Columbus and didn't, it went from a business office, Debbie Campbell's, to Administrator Greg Vick's office. Computer to show that Ohio checkbook works. That was it. I wasn't referencing the night she was here. I was referencing that.
Okay.
That's what I was
And
referencing.
that
And
may
that
be
was
true,
indeed
but let's get it all in.
That's
And
why
we will have it all.
we'll put this in also.
Let's stay on the subject of minutes. Mr. LaBarbera, I'd like to address your objections for the November meeting dated December 6th. Mr. LaBarbera, if you're going to quote me, don't make the quote up. I did not say that you were reckless. I said you were reckless with the facts. Your false statements lacks all transparency. Mr. LaBarbera,
This was said.
I have the floor. I did not interrupt you, and you won't interrupt me. Mr. LaBarbera, as it relates to your last paragraph where you state, "I am not pleased with my fellow trustees, Dennis and Tom. We don't share the same definition of transparency, and I've been told every month for the past year it only takes 2 to approve the minutes." For the record, we are not pleased with you either, because your self-serving definition of transparency is a fake and a fraud. And I will address that later in the meeting under trustee comments. And for the record, Mr. LaBarbera, I went back through all the audio while working out at the gym, and I could not find one single time that anyone told you that it, quote, "it only takes 2 to approve the minutes." You are not being transparent when you make that claim. That is 100% false. Now, if you're referring to the kindergarten math that 3 minus 2 equals 1, that is rather obvious. But do not accuse anyone of telling you, quote, every month for the past year that it only takes 2 votes to approve the minutes, end quote. Because that is an outright lie and lacks all transparency. So to get back on track with the approval of minutes, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Porter, will you make the roll, please?
I'm not done. The comments in the meeting that I just, besides this, I said perhaps, the word perhaps, that changes the whole line of the sentence on page 4, the 30-second time limit, the 1-minute 30-second time limit. When I said about the Parks Recreation Director.
I'm not talking about the Parks and Rec Director. I said
You're
nothing. I said
questioning
nothing.
my integrity in this
I said
meeting.
nothing about that.
And wait, first of all, how many does it take? How many votes does it take to approve the minutes? How many?
It takes 2.
It
And no
takes
one has
2.
ever told you that, Mr. LaBarbera.
Yes,
no
you
one
did.
has ever told you. I
You
went
do
through
it.
every audio.
It's a fact, but it's the fact that takes 2 to do the minutes.
Mr. Porter, roll call, please.
Mr. LaBarbera,
No.
Mr. Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Weedman.
Aye. In an effort to be transparent, I would suggest that we include Mr. LaBarbera's objection regarding the Ohio checkbook situation, along with the complete discussion of this topic this evening in the minutes. Those minutes should also include the comments by me regarding the subject and the note that after feedback from staff, Mr. LaBarbera was the only person that was in attendance at both meetings that subscribes to the version he has presented.
But that was a different meeting we were talking about. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the meeting where he went ape crap, going nuts over everything with Marcy for no
Ms.
reason.
LaBarbera, I object to that.
Well,
characterization.
Stop.
It happened, and there
Stop
were
it.
people here who were there.
Comments from residents. Greg?
I have a resolution authorizing a contract for the purchase, for the purchase of a 2020 Freightliner M2-106 truck.
Motion to approve?
I'll second. Any further discussion?
They're going to low.
State bid.
The state bid is 7,000, over the 85,000. Yeah. What he's doing is he's bidding.
No, those are two separate.
Two
separate.
Those are two separate things.
This
One's
is,
a truck, one's a
this
truck.
is the truck for $70,451.
And then the others.
The other is everything that goes on the truck. It's actually more expensive than the truck.
Okay, yes.
We have a
I
motion,
second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, Mr. Porter?
Mr. Barber?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye.
And then the equipment on the truck, which is the bed and all the plow and all the snow stuff. Resolution authorizing a contract for the purchase of equipment for installation on a 2020 Freightliner M2106.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarbera?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye.
And then the next two resolutions were actually voted on at the workshop on Tuesday, but I was not happy with some of the language that was in there, so I think we should pass these or vote on these resolutions. The first one had some emergency language in there, and it did not pass unanimously, so it wouldn't be an emergency. The irony of that is it doesn't need to be an emergency anyway. That's a home rule situation, and this statute is not a home, or the statute that we're dealing with here is not a home rule statute. Any township can do it. So we didn't need the emergency language in the first place, but I would just like to clean it up. So we have a resolution providing for and authorizing removal of vegetation, garbage, refuse, and other debris, and declaring a nuisance for the property located at 8671 Darnell Avenue, Sycamore Township, Ohio 45236.
Motion to approve?
Second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarbera?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye.
You realize this is the one you voted no.
Yeah, I voted no on this and then, went through a whole bunch of paperwork from Mr. Bickford, and, I still think it's a neighbor problem that has got to be solved between the two neighbors.
So I think Greg said the same
And I
thing.
agree. I don't know how the debris got down there.
And then the same thing on the junk vehicle, a resolution providing for the removal of a junk vehicle in Sycamore Township, Hamilton County, and the proper disposal, storage, or impoundment of a motor vehicle by implementing the procedure set forth in Sycamore Township Resolution Number 2012-14 and Sections 505.173, 505.85, and 505.871 of the Ohio Revised Code.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarbera?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye. I believe that's it. Okay. Next is trustee comments. Any of the trustees have any further comments to make?
I have one comment. Given the complexity and the length of comments that have been made at this meeting, I would like to make a motion that we hire a transcriber to transcribe the minutes of this meeting to submit as the minutes for this evening on a one-time basis.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion, yes.
You talking about typing the tape?
From the audio?
Yes, transcribing the audio to use as the draft of the minutes for this meeting.
I'll second. Any further discussion?
I would discuss the fact that your basis for your whole conversation was not the meeting that I was referring to. It was the meeting where we had the workshop meeting where Mr. Porter was out of line.
There
That's
has
what I
been
would-
confusion over this for months, and
I
it keeps
know, but
being
you're
brought
going
up.
back, you asked everybody down this line about the Thursday night meeting. It wasn't about the workshop meeting that I was referencing, and it had been since April.
That's all the more reason why these minutes are gonna be accurate. I think we should have them transcribed verbatim
And my
this time.
corrections will be in this,
Everything that you said,
Everything that's
everything that
been
was
said
said in this meeting
tonight.
will be included in the minutes.
and I'll go with that.
That would be not including the public hearing that we
That's
had
correct,
prior
yes.
to just at the
The
start
regular meeting,
of the regular meeting.
the regular meeting.
And that one line was agreed upon.
Everything
in
was
April,
said was said.
If
Yeah.
that been agreed upon in April, we would not be here talking about that.
All right. I had another question and I lost my train of thought, so go ahead.
Okay, is that all, Danny? Anything else?
Well,
Mr. Lu-
we'd like to vote on that if you're.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Mr. LaBarber?
Aye.
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Weedman?
Aye.
No, my point that I wanted to make is in doing that, I don't know how long it may be before you
Correct.
get those from the transcriber, just so.
Maybe that'll be done.
I'll
not gonna be
probably,
tomorrow.
I'll probably go to Pate. They did CIG, and they're still not done with CIG. Granted, this is a much shorter meeting, but unless,
Are you having CIG transcript?
Yes.
yeah, we had CIG transcribed, yes.
The whole thing.
Okay.
We did.
No, we did.
Oh, we did?
We ended up doing
Was
that
that us?
because
Okay.
both attorneys ended up wanting it. So I took it over, so it came from us, based on whatever happened with that case.
It's too late to do anything.
I understand.
All right. And anyway, my point being, it may not even be ready by the next meeting.
Sure.
Depending on their schedule.
Sure.
So,
I'll get with Doug, we'll get it to Aceable or Pate, there's a couple of them out there.
Okay. Mr. LaBarber, any trustee comments?
I may have some after you're done.
For the last 12 months, the two board members, our law director, and all of our administrative staff have been lectured by Mr. LaBarbera about transparency and how our township was not transparent. So tonight, I'd like to address the word transparency in my trustee comments. As I am sure Mr. LaBarbera would agree, the root of transparency is the truth. Let me repeat that. The root of transparency is the truth. So when one doesn't actually tell the truth, they're not being transparent, as I'm sure Mr. LaBarbera would agree. You heard a number of situations tonight during our minutes discussion where Mr. LaBarbera was clearly not telling the truth, and in turn, was not being transparent. But let's review a few things that Mr. LaBarbera said during the CIG hearings and identify if they were transparent or if they lacked the truth, which makes them not transparent. On the evening of October 18th, Mr. Bertoli pointed out that I had received a campaign contribution from Carriage Encore LLC. Mr. Mara said the contribution was received, and I quote, immediately after the election, end quote. Well, that certainly lacked transparency because it was very far from the truth. That check was dated October 17th, over 3 weeks before Election Day, and deposited on the afternoon of October 25th, 14 days before the election. I'll come back to that in a minute. While I already corrected that in my statement before deliberation, I want to go to the evening of November 13th. Mr. Fusero asked Mr. LaBarbera how much money he received from Dr. Soey in contributions, and Mr. LaBarbera replied, and I quote, I don't know if I got a contribution from him at all. I don't think I did, end quote. Let the record show that not only did Mr. LaBarbera receive contributions from Dr. Soey was his largest contributor to the tune of $6,005 in total contributions. Now, Mr. LaBarbera, I think you would agree that there is absolutely no way that you could have possibly been truthful when you said that, quote, I don't know if I got a contribution from him at all. I would say that this shows a premeditated lack of transparency on your part. You knew very well that night that you received contributions from Dr. Soey, yet you lied to everybody in the audience. Then later, in that line of discussion, you said, I had a little more than $10,000 for my whole campaign. In reviewing your campaign finance report, you didn't have a little more than $10,000 for the whole campaign. You actually reported total contributions of $23,726.46, or more than double the amount you stated in the public hearing. Mr. LaBarbera, I'm sure you wouldn't consider that to be truthful or transparent. I have 23 other examples of blatant lack of transparency on the part of Mr. LaBarbera, but I would like to point out just one more tonight, and I will save the rest for a more opportune time. Mr. LaBarbera, you made a big deal about the check I received from Carriage Encore LLC, believing the lies that Mr. Maris spotted on when that check was actually received. You probed Mr. Bertoli at the public hearing on the 18th of October with your quote, "You're saying that Mr. Weedman got that contribution after our campaign?" End of quote. You knew that wasn't true because I was told by someone at the Board of Elections that you came down there and got a copy of my campaign finance report within 5 minutes after you walked out of the building with it. You knew from reading my report that what Mr. Murrah and Mr. Bertoli were saying were totally false, yet you proceeded to ask that question. Mr. LaBarbera, it was clear that your question was an effort to deceive the good residents of Sycamore Township, trying to cast doubt on my integrity. Well, Mr. LaBarbera, I have a copy of your finance report. And for the record, you received a $1,000 check from Dr. Sohi, check number 8290 on November 20th, 2 weeks after the election. But the best is yet to come. 2 days later, on November 22nd, you took Dr. Sohi's $1,000 and another $1,000 from your campaign committee, and you paid yourself back personally a total of $2,000 to pay back a loan you made to the campaign. Dr. Sohi gave you $1,000 after the election so you could repay yourself the loan you had to your committee, and you tell all these good folks that you quote, "don't know if I got a contribution from him at all." This no longer qualifies as not being transparent and falls into the category of blatant deceit. Mr. LaBarbera, this township has been totally transparent long before you got here. We signed up for Ohio Checkbook before you arrived, and we would have done it over 2 years earlier if their system would have interfaced with our Bucks accounting system. Every property acquisition we made along Montgomery Road was posted in minutes with attached contracts and resolutions, and I know they were because in a previous meeting you admitted that is where you found the information on those properties. When we purchase a property like your favorite piece of the Taco Bell, we don't list that in our resolution as the Taco Bell property. But every property acquisition has a parcel number that is readily available on the county auditor's website. That is the legal identifying property number for the parcel of land. That is true transparency, and that was included in every single acquisition we made. I believe I demonstrated tonight that you don't practice what you preach, and you were right in your December objections when you said that, quote, "we don't share the same definition of transparency." We don't. Your definition as demonstrated tonight is a fake and a fraud, and I want nothing to do with that type of deceit. I will save my remaining 22 examples for another day.
$10,000 contribution that came in the 20th. It was a week or so before the election.
It was 3 weeks.
It was 2 weeks. It was less than that. I had the date. I don't have your paperwork here. And that was for $10,000 on a project that you knew was going to happen. And I could go back and state other things over the years where you were. It's the images pay for play in Sycamore Township were wide open for business. That's because of you. You've got to be the leader. You've got to be the big talk. Now, I'm going to make sure that everybody knows what the Paul Sohi donations were. I wasn't sure because he did walk with me. We used his venue, his place. There's a thing called in-kind contributions, which you have not apparently ever listed on your financial report. So
Because I didn't have it. That's what?
Nobody's ever helped you out. Nobody's ever helped you out.
That's correct.
No gas money for anybody.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I marked down everything. Lady gave us ice the day of the election. I put that down. I think $35 for somebody on that. $100 for Paul Sohi's wife who cooked dinner for us one night. For his venue, I put $2,000 because we used his place. I could have put down $100 or $200. I valued that, and I overvalued it because I talked to Deb Akron down at the Board of Elections. You put that down, and I'm open. I put myself wide open, and you took a swing, but it wasn't $10,000 from a client that you knew was going to be coming right before us. And you did that, and you've done that over the years.
That's incorrect.
So that's not incorrect. I went
Mr.
back and
LaBarbera,
checked, that's all gonna be on the transcript there.
Yeah.
But money, financial money from Dr. Soy, I think it were two checks, 1,000 once, and then I think 200 or 400 or something like
It would
that.
be 500.
500, so $1,500 cash collected from, in contributions from here.
And that's why they call them in-kind contributions, because there are contributions to your campaign. Those are all included in contributions. If they weren't
Financial
contributions,
contribution was
if they
$1,500.
weren't contributions, then they would make it
Not
as.
$10,000. And okay, you're gonna play, and then you vote for it. No, I mean, and you have a tendency, you say, well, the transparency. I went with Dusty Rhodes over the property acquisitions that we had, the Taco Bell and those sites. There were attachments, and I went, when I was applying for, running for trustee, I went back and forth many times with Mr. Bickford, because Debbie had to refer Mr. Bickford. I had to go to Mr. Bickford for any public records request at a certain point. I was not getting all the information. And a lot of that information, Mr. Bickford would later admit it, had attachments to it. They're still trying to clean up those records. But no, I pointed out in the meeting, and you never objected to it at that meeting, when I pointed out all the different things. I went right down the line of where we were not transparent. So don't hand me that thing about not being transparent. This township, the meetings were in that back room back there with the door closed until sometimes 5 minutes after 9 o'clock. Then the doors were open and there were 3 people sitting back there. You had been back there, the trustees were back there for 15, 20 minutes. You can look at the cars. And at least the image was maybe something was going on. So the doors were then open. When I became a trustee, we opened the door when we were back there. And we moved it in here more transparent. Marcy Longenecker and the people of the trustee's office, the treasurer's office, were lack at the talk about being transparent. Because this township, in December, said we're gonna go on Ohio checkbook. And what? It was December, November? Okay, it was November, December, and it was in I think the newsletter in December, when I got it, the fall newsletter, that you were going on this. And here I am, we're sitting around, it was, April, and nothing had been done. And you were compatible. So,
Anything else?
that's
Okay.
what I gave you example after example for the last, how many months, last year.
We received your lectures.
And, no, I took the lectures from Denny Connor from day one. Are you kidding me? So now you're sitting there, so,
Okay.
you know,
So that,
but $10,000
is that anything else you got?
No, that's
Okay, bills and receipts, Mr. Porter.
Yeah, we had receipts of $586,700.